Hi, Promise Fellows. This is Snowmix. I'm the Training Development and Evaluation Director. And right now I am helping out our ops teams and just sharing a bit of needed information around policy and benefits. And I'll have a help person at the end of this if you have questions in order that you can reach out to. But just to start off, you're doing a term of service, which is a wonderful and kind of like a weird idea for like the employer. You are serving at your host site, which is a high school, middle school, community center, but you're employed by us. So even though you're not at the office with us, we are your employer, which means everything from benefits of pay periods, health insurance, workers' comp, any of that kind of stuff. That goes through us. So please make sure that you reach out to your alliance trainer. So that will either be myself or the new training manager as the year progresses, and or the ops people that I share at the end, in order to make sure that if there's something big that's happening that we are aware and can help support with. As we think about benefits, the first is kind of what defines success in our program. Essentially, even though you are an hourly position, it's really I don't know, that's what it works out to be, because that's how we like think about this world, but it's really you getting up to those total amount of hours. So a full-time person, 1,700 hours, reduced 12, part-time 9. Those averages are mostly true, but honestly, as long as you get to all of your hours by the time of your service term, whether that meant that you had a few weeks that were 50-hour weeks, and some that were 30 hours a weeks, you just need to make sure that you're engaged in getting your service done. I will also share that many Promise Fellows go well over their total number of hours, because if you've ever worked or have engaged in like school community center settings, there's often like 45-hour weeks. So I'm not trying to say that in a way to burn folks out, but you should be set up to have more hours than what you need. And a lot of people end over what their contract is. And we just want to make sure that people are taking care of themselves, and you'll get feedback throughout the year. And all of that is tied to your living allowance. So you have the numbers that apply to you by your position in front of you. And I will link the timesheet and pay schedule below. Only note that I'd have is the dollar amounts that you see are pre-tax numbers. So unfortunately, tax does come out. And as you serve all of your hours, when you get there, here is your Ed Award. Essentially, it's the biggest one is the full-time members, and everything's prorated down based off the amount of hours that you're serving. And at the end of your service term, it's generally comes within 4 weeks. It's often sooner than that, but effectively you will have a My AmeriCorps account, or an AmeriCorps bank account, essentially, that all this gets deposited in, that you can use in order to disperse for qualified student loans. And we will help with any questions that you have with that. The last slide referenced a bit on loan forbearance. If you were an AmeriCorps member, either through our ERI program or another program last year, you did not need to put your loans in forbearance, because kind of wrapped up in some of this COVID policy pieces is that that was already happening, and that you don't need to put your loans in forbearance. It's still technically true through January, but if you need to, we'll be in communication with you as legislation changes or not, in order to let people know that maybe January or later you'd have to put your loans in forbearance, so that way you're not making payments or paying interest on it. We'll do our best to reach out to you with that information, but the start of the year is not something that needs to happen. You can make a note in your calendars in January to make sure, we'll be communicative, but to follow through with any action steps if that means at that point you need to put your loans on forbearance. Health insurance. If you are enrolled in our health insurance, at the earliest day one of your service, you'll get an email that is sharing, everything from information, coverage, and access. We are no longer using physical cards, and you'll just be accessing it through the app. So you should be getting this on day one, or at the very latest by the end of your first week. I'm going to have contact information at the end of this. So if you have questions on it, that you can reach out, and we'll of course get back to you. One big benefit that we're trying to perpetually positively push for is SNAP benefits or food supports. Essentially, you are an AmeriCorps person that, yes, you have a stipend, but your stipend is not considered income. So even though the money that you're getting paid, looks like a paycheck, by the nature of this position, it does not count. We'll be sending everyone kind of like a packet their first day that has like the policy guidance on how this is not considered income. And on the next slide, I'm going to pop up a link here in a second that essentially we're tagging Second Harvest Heartland in to help set up people with SNAP benefits. Anyone can do this themselves, just to their own county, but we are tapping into Second Harvest's help on this because they will essentially do all the application and all that for you. And right now, here is a screener to see if you qualify. All right, so as you think about service, we want to make sure that we are that we're being thoughtful, and if you have accommodations needed, that we're providing it. So you've had one round where you did an application where you could have put in if there was any needed accommodations. If you did that, we will have already reached out to your site supervisor at your school or community center in order to try to set that up for you. If you have not had those conversations yet, just please be as transparent as possible. We want to make sure that if you need something to perform your job or your service position, that you have it. And we shared the same with your supervisor, just to make sure that we're setting you up for success. I do want to share one piece on accommodations as considered with COVID. Unfortunately, COVID is still a thing. Essentially, those accommodations, we can make sure that you have what's needed if you yourself gets COVID. And of course, if that means that unfortunately you can't serve for a little bit and then service needs to look different, we will work with your site in order to make sure that you have accommodations there. But there's not accommodations that can be legally done if you are living with somebody who's at risk for COVID and you're trying to change, position. Essentially, it only is for you yourself. That said, I've had this job for 6 years. Most Promise Fellow supervisors really want to make sure that you're supported. So if there's something you need, even if it doesn't fall into the legal definition of what needs to happen, please be in touch with your supervisor, with your trainer, so myself or the training manager, and we'll try to make sure that you have what you need, regardless of what quote unquote has to happen. All right, so to get into some policies and procedures, we are Minnesota Alliance with Youth. The first word right there. You need to be doing your service in the state of Minnesota. Sometimes Promise Fellows are engaging with some version of a student trip or something else, and will be going to other states. You need to reach out to us. Most likely it will be okay. But we need to make sure that you're covered. Part of this is workers' comp or liability pieces to make sure that you're covered in whatever states you're going to. But the assumption and baseline is that the service is happening within the state of Minnesota. If part of your position could entail home visits, we want to make sure that you aren't doing those yourself, that you're having the licensed staff member going with you. Just you're in a support role. This isn't necessarily something where you should be stepping in and doing home visits by yourself. And then, as with everything, being COVID safe about things. Related driving. We've told your supervisors that we discourage you driving students around. And sometimes it does make sense for Promise Fellows to be driving. Often that happens with a district vehicle. So if you will be driving, reach out to your supervisor. They should have, already had you go through a course and then use said like school van or community center van or similar. Or if this is something that you will do with your personal car, and you are okay with it, just know that it goes under your auto insurance. Ideally, we don't have Promise Fellows driving students in their personal vehicles, just to make sure that that you're safe, that everything's covered. This one's hard. Social media. I feel like social media is perpetually hard. Our overarching guidance is that you're not friending students, and of course, you're not sharing student info. I mean, that would get into like the database training if you've watched that one yet, that you can't be sharing personally identifiable information. I will say that there are many of our sites that actually, one of the ways that you engage with students is through social media, but you do that through your site's guidance. Oftentimes that's making like a professional version of yourself. So for instance, like I have my Gnome Wigs Facebook, but maybe I've got like my Gnome like insert host site name here. That's like the work version of myself. And then that's how I communicate with students. And that's what my site expects. But please make sure that you're checking with your site, and that if there isn't guidance, our recommendation or guideline is to not friend students. So we have furnished your supervisor with like an on-site or orientation list just to make sure that you're grounded and you get onboarded. I'm going to put the link in right now. Essentially, at the start of the year, honestly, any point in time that you join a school year, there's always a lot of things happening. So if there's things on this list that you've not been in communication with your supervisor about, please feel free just to reach out to them and ask. It's not by ill will or not training that anybody doesn't want to share anything. It's just that inevitably there's 1,000 things going on. And so if you need to manage up and ask, about something on this list, please do. Or ask your supervisor about something on the list. So when you think about service, we also want to let everyone know that we have a coaching policy. I got ahead of myself. We have a coaching policy. Essentially, we expect that your supervisor is engaging with you and finding you if there's anything that was ever a misstep or needed a redirect, and offering the needed coaching and seeing what you need from it. So, both them sharing, what needs to happen and the why behind it, and then also checking in with you. We expect that a supervisor is, trying to find you for like 3 versions of coaching before there's any version of like an improvement plan needed. But if, something persists and support needs to look differently and they have been doing the coaching, then there would be an improvement plan that we'd ask to do. All of this would happen transparently, of course. And then finally, kind of start to finish of going from benefits into policy into your final end of service. There's really two, I should say there's 3 ways that somebody finishes. They finish just because they got all their hours and went to their term end date, and everything's said and done, got their award. They finished early for a compelling reason. That is often something outside of your control. That could be, unfortunately, like taking care of a family member, or other like hard instances, like your partner had to take, I don't know, I'm not going to make up things. So essentially something that's out of your control. If that happens, reach out, and we can make sure that you have essentially like a prorated exit up to that point and get that chunk of your ed award. And we'll need some documentation to go along with it in order to support exiting early for something outside of your reason or out of your control. The other is a cause exit, and that's essentially that's kind of like quitting a job or firing. So that's like you just choosing to be done with your service, or something that unfortunately went too far, and so your supervisor needed to have you end your service, and having a cause exit. The fortunate reality there is there's no portion of that award that you'd be able to get. So this kind of concludes your benefits into policy, into to exit information for pre-recorded. And I'm just going to pause, see if you have any questions. And then right now on the screen, just you have Emily's contact information. There's more people on the operations teams that might be helping, but Emily's going to be like your first stop in order to make sure that you have what you need. So there's her contact information. Thanks.